The kitchen smelled of vanilla and caramelized sugar, the scent of celebration lingering in the air. My mother meticulously arranged the cupcakes on a tiered stand, her focus entirely on making everything perfect. The delicate decorations, the flawless frosting, the precise placement, every detail carefully curated for the occasion. But there was no space in this display for me. The weight of my medical school diploma pressed against my chest, the frame still crisp and untouched. The words I had just heard echoed in my mind, each syllable tightening in my throat like a noose. She deserves it more. My sister Sophia, always the priority, always the one they placed on a pedestal while I stood in the shadows, my achievements reduced to afterthoughts. For years, I had told myself that the imbalance was unintentional, that they simply didn't realize how much harder I had worked to reach the same milestones as Sophia. But now, standing in the kitchen of my childhood home, I knew better. This was not ignorance, this was a choice. The reality had been made painfully clear. My parents had paid off every cent of Sophia's medical school loans without hesitation, ensuring she entered her career free of financial burdens. I, on the other hand, was left with hundreds of thousands in debt. Their reasoning? Sophia needed the support more. I had always been resourceful, always found my own way. In their eyes, I had never needed them the way she did, and therefore I did not deserve the same consideration. The injustice of it settled in my bones like lead. It wasn't about fairness. It was never about fairness. I had spent years sacrificing sleep, social events, and even my own health to prove I was just as capable as Sophia. While she enjoyed fully funded tutoring sessions and extended deadlines, I juggled part-time jobs and late-night study sessions. When she retook her MCAT with a private instructor, I relied on free online resources and my own determination to land a score in the 98th percentile. None of it mattered. They had invested in her future, while expecting me to build my own with nothing but resilience. Tomorrow, they would host a grand celebration in her honor, inviting extended family, professors, and influential doctors. A debt-free celebration, they called it, as though her financial freedom had been earned rather than gifted. A banner with her name would be draped across the venue, a cake would be displayed with gold-lettered congratulations, and the guests would raise their glasses to toast her success. There would be no mention that we had graduated with identical GPAs, no acknowledgement of the fact that I had achieved every milestone without the advantages she had been handed. I turned to leave, the nausea curling in my stomach unbearable. As I stepped outside, the crisp evening air did little to clear my mind. My phone buzzed in my hand, the screen lighting up with a message. Dr. Harrington had been my mentor for the past 2 years, a renowned neurosurgeon who had seen in me what my own parents had never recognized. She had pushed me beyond my limits, believed in my capabilities, and guided me toward opportunities I had only dared to dream about. Her message was brief, but powerful. Urgent news about the Langston Fellowship. Call me immediately. The weight of it hit me like a freight train. The Langston Fellowship was the most prestigious neurosurgical research position in the country, awarded to only one graduating student nationwide. The recipient would receive a fully funded research position, housing, a stipend, and complete loan forgiveness. The ultimate validation of everything I had worked for. For a brief, fleeting moment, relief washed over me. I would be debt-free, just like Sophia. But as quickly as the thought surfaced, it was followed by a chilling realization. Dr. Harrington had been invited to Sophia's celebration as a courtesy. She had no idea of the family dynamics at play, no knowledge of the favors Sophia had always been granted. If she announced the Langston Fellowship during the event, it would steal the spotlight away from the daughter my parents had worked so hard to present as the golden child, they would see it as an intrusion, a betrayal, a disruption of their carefully constructed image of Sophia's superiority. And yet, for the first time in my life, I had something they could not take away. My success was undeniable, a result of my own perseverance, my own brilliance. No amount of favoritism could rewrite this narrative. The question was I ready to let the truth be known? I stared at the night sky, the weight of tomorrow pressing heavily on my chest. For years, I had accepted being in the background. Would I finally take my place at the forefront? Tomorrow, everything would change. Amelia arrived at the rooftop venue, the skyline of New York casting golden hues over the carefully curated celebration. The space was adorned with elegant floral arrangements and glistening chandeliers, a spectacle meant to highlight the success of her twin sister, Sophia. Guests mingled, exchanging congratulatory remarks as waitstaff moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. Amelia, however, felt invisible. Despite wearing a deep blue gown that should have commanded attention, she was barely acknowledged by her own family. She moved through the crowd, overhearing snippets of conversation, her parents beaming with pride as they introduced Sophia to influential medical professionals, ensuring she had every advantage available to her. Amelia stood at a distance, watching as her mother gently placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder, guiding her toward the chief of surgery from one of the top hospitals in the country. Her father spoke with unwavering confidence about Sophia's future, weaving a narrative of unparalleled dedication and brilliance. Amelia, though equally accomplished, was a silent observer in her own family's story. As she sipped her champagne, Dr. Harrington arrived, her commanding presence immediately noticeable. She sought Amelia out, offering a warm smile and a congratulatory nod, a rare moment of validation that Amelia clung to. The Langston Fellowship was hers, a prestigious achievement that would alter the course of her career. Yet when her parents saw Dr. Harrington speaking with her, they dismissed it with polite disinterest, quickly steering the conversation back to Sophia's promising future. The evening had been meticulously crafted to celebrate Sophia alone, and any mention of Amelia's success was treated as an afterthought. As the evening continued, Amelia was taken aback when Sophia unexpectedly pulled her aside. The weight of years of favoritism had always lingered unspoken between them. But now, in the glow of the city lights, Sophia's expression was different. There was something raw in her eyes, something Amelia had never seen before, guilt. Sophia admitted that she had always been aware of their parents' treatment, that she had tried in vain to make them acknowledge Amelia's successes. Her voice was laced with regret, but Amelia wasn't sure if it was enough. Recognition after years of silence felt hollow. Her father's voice cut through the murmurs of the guests as he took center stage, ready to deliver his grand speech. He raised his glass, a proud smile plastered on his face, recounting stories of Sophia's resilience, her brilliance, her dedication. The words were expected, the applause rehearsed. But before he could finish, Sophia did something neither Amelia nor their parents anticipated. She interrupted. A hush fell over the crowd as Sophia turned to address everyone, her voice steady yet firm. She spoke not of herself, but of Amelia, the sacrifices she had made, the silent battles she had fought, the excellence she had achieved despite the lack of support. The moment stretched, the weight of her words sinking in. Their parents stood frozen, their carefully orchestrated celebration unraveling before them. Then, as if perfectly timed, Dr. Harrington stepped forward, seizing the moment. With a composed yet powerful tone, she announced that Amelia had been awarded the Langston Fellowship, a prestigious honor reserved for the most exceptional minds in neurosurgery. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. The celebration shifted, guests who had come to congratulate Sophia turned their attention to Amelia, offering handshakes, questions, admiration. For the first time, Amelia stood in the spotlight. The narrative had changed, and her parents, who had worked so hard to craft Sophia's success story, could do nothing to rewrite this moment. Morning arrived with a quiet stillness that did little to soothe the weight pressing against Amelia's chest. The previous night's celebration had unraveled years of unspoken truths, and now reality was setting in. The fellowship announcement had shifted the entire focus of the evening, and instead of basking in Sophia's achievements, the event had become a public reckoning of their parents' favoritism. As she stood in her kitchen, staring blankly at the untouched cup of coffee in her hands, she replayed the expressions on their faces: shock, disbelief, and finally, resentment. She had spent a lifetime living in her sister's shadow, excelling quietly, hoping her parents would one day see her for who she truly was. But the moment they were forced to acknowledge her, their first reaction wasn't pride, it was anger. A knock at the door sent a chill down her spine. She already knew who it was. She'd been expecting them. Her parents wasted no time once they stepped inside. They barely looked at her apartment, as if the space where she lived and thrived was unimportant. They weren't here to visit their daughter. They were here to reclaim control. They had always controlled the narrative, shaping reality to fit their version of success, where Sophia was the golden child, and Amelia was the one who could handle things on her own. But last night had fractured that image, and now they were here to repair it on their terms. Their words came sharp and accusing. They didn't acknowledge the years of effort Amelia had poured into her work, nor did they recognize the sacrifices she had made to achieve the Langston Fellowship. Instead, they painted her as selfish, accusing her of ruining the evening. According to them, she had taken something that didn't belong to her. The celebration was meant for Sophia, and by allowing the spotlight to shift, she had embarrassed them in front of their guests. They told her she needed to reject the fellowship. It was, in their words, the only way to make things right. They had spent years ensuring Sophia's success, and now they expected Amelia to step aside once again. Declining the opportunity, they claimed, would allow Sophia's reputation to remain intact. After all, what would people say when they found out Amelia had surpassed her? Amelia had spent her entire life bending under their expectations, sacrificing parts of herself just to be tolerated, let alone loved. But this was different. They weren't just asking for compliance, they were demanding she erase everything she had built for herself, just so they wouldn't have to confront the reality that their perception of her had always been wrong. But Amelia wasn't the same girl who had quietly accepted her place in the background. She had worked too hard, endured too much, and sacrificed more than they would ever know. There was no hesitation as she refused. This time, she wouldn't let them shape her life to fit their version of the truth. The confrontation escalated, turning into a storm of accusations and deflections. They called her ungrateful, insisted she owed them for everything they had done to support her. It was laughable. They had never supported her. Every opportunity she had was the result of her own effort, while Sophia had been carried by their influence. Then, in a moment of unexpected clarity, something shifted. Sophia, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke. She didn't take their side. She didn't tell Amelia to back down. Instead, she acknowledged what Amelia had always feared, that she had seen the favoritism too. Sophia admitted she had spent years pretending not to notice, afraid that confronting it would cost her their love. But now, watching them try to tear Amelia down, she couldn't ignore it any longer. She stood beside Amelia, choosing to support her sister over their parents' manipulation. Their parents' reaction was immediate. The anger in their eyes burned hotter than before, but now it was mixed with something else, betrayal. They had expected Amelia to be the problem. They hadn't considered that Sophia might finally see through them. The damage was done. They wouldn't back down, and neither would Amelia. But instead of letting go, they retaliated. They still had connections, people who trusted them, people who could be influenced. In the days that followed, Amelia discovered the depths of their interference. They had contacted members of the Langston Fellowship Board, spreading misinformation, attempting to convince them that Amelia was undeserving. They implied she had only received the offer because of favoritism from Dr. Harrington, downplaying her years of research and dedication. The betrayal cut deep. It was one thing to be overlooked, but it was another to have the very people who should have supported her actively working to destroy her future. But they underestimated her, just as they always had. She gathered every document, every record that proved she had earned her place. She had spent her career meticulously documenting her achievements, her research, her recommendations. She contacted Dr. Harrington, who was furious at the accusations, and together they dismantled every lie her parents had spread. In the end, their plan failed. The fellowship remained hers. The board saw through the deception, and her parents' interference only served to damage their own credibility. That was the final moment of clarity Amelia needed. She had spent years waiting for them to see her worth, but she realized now that it wasn't just about favoritism, it was about control. They had built their entire identity around Sophia's success, and anything that threatened that narrative had to be removed. But she wasn't going to be erased. She cut ties completely. There was no point in trying to salvage a relationship that had never truly existed. For years, she had feared losing them, but as she finally stepped away, she felt something unexpected, relief. She had spent her entire life fighting for a place in their world, but now she saw it for what it was, small, limiting, and full of conditions. She didn't need their approval anymore. She never had. She was free. 6 months had passed since Amelia had severed ties with her parents, and in that time, she had built something remarkable. Moving to California for the Langston Fellowship had been the most liberating decision of her life. Here, she was no longer overshadowed by family expectations or their relentless favoritism. She had carved out a name for herself in neurosurgical research, earning the respect of colleagues who saw her as she was, brilliant, hardworking, and entirely deserving of her success. Her work consumed her, but it was a passion that felt fulfilling rather than suffocating. Days were long, but she thrived under the pressure, proving herself in high-stakes surgeries and research breakthroughs. She had left behind the need for validation from her parents, or at least she thought she had, until the legal notice arrived. A formal claim filed by her parents accusing her of financial fraud. They alleged that they had supported her education and career, demanding compensation for what they claimed were investments in her future. The sheer audacity of the claim left Amelia breathless. These were the same parents who had denied her financial support, who had explicitly chosen to pay off Sophia's debts, while telling Amelia she was resourceful enough to manage on her own. At first, she had thought it was a mistake, a miscommunication, but the reality soon became clear. This wasn't just about money, it was about power. They had lost control over her, and this was their final attempt to force her back into submission. Sophia had called, shaken by the revelation. Their parents had been feeding her a twisted version of events, implying that Amelia had been unfairly cruel, that she had turned her back on family out of pride rather than necessity. It was a manipulative ploy, one designed to isolate Amelia and restore Sophia to their control. But Sophia had grown too. She had begun to see through their tactics, recognizing the deep-seated favoritism she had once benefited from. Amelia had no choice but to fight back. She gathered evidence, compiling years of records, proving her parents had never contributed to her education, her training, or even her basic living expenses. Every tuition bill paid through her own scholarships, every student loan taken in her name, every rejected request for assistance, it was all there, documented in meticulous detail. The case moved quickly, and soon she found herself standing in a courtroom, facing the people who had once held absolute power over her life. They had come prepared, dressed in the quiet elegance of people used to commanding respect, spinning a story of sacrifice and parental devotion. They painted themselves as victims, elderly parents, abandoned by an ungrateful daughter. But Amelia had facts. She had evidence. And she had something they did not: truth. As she presented her case, their carefully constructed narrative unraveled. Documents proved their financial neglect. Statements from faculty and colleagues confirmed Amelia's independent rise. Even Sophia, standing beside her, publicly acknowledged that their parents had never once contributed to Amelia's success. The judge's ruling was swift and damning. The claims were dismissed as fraudulent, the case thrown out with prejudice. Worse for them, word spread quickly through their social circles. The image they had spent years curating of a respectable, successful family was now tarnished by the revelation that they had tried to extort their own daughter. As Amelia walked out of the courthouse, Sophia at her side, she felt something she hadn't fully grasped before: peace. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was closure. They could no longer touch her, could no longer twist her achievements into something they could claim for themselves. Her parents had tried to take everything from her. Instead, they had only ensured she would never need them again. A year had passed since the courtroom battle, and Amelia had stepped fully into the life she had always been meant to lead. No longer weighed down by the expectations of her family, she had carved her own path, not just as a neurosurgeon, but as a leader in her field. Her research had gained national recognition, securing grants that expanded her team, allowing her to push boundaries in neurovascular regeneration. She was no longer just a promising fellow. She was becoming a force of her own, respected, admired, and independent in a way that no longer felt like defiance but fulfillment. There was a new confidence in her, one that radiated in the way she carried herself, in the way colleagues listened when she spoke, in the way she no longer felt the need to shrink herself to accommodate others. She had always been capable, but now she truly believed it. She had made a name for herself without compromise. News of her rising success had inevitably reached her parents. Their influence, once so dominant in their social circles, had begun to wane after their failed lawsuit. People whispered, some avoided them, others openly distanced themselves. Their reputation, built on the illusion of being perfect parents, had fractured under the weight of their own choices. And then the letter arrived. It was long, carefully worded, a plea wrapped in justification. They apologized, but it was conditional, softened by their refusal to take full accountability. They spoke of their past decisions as misunderstandings, of their treatment of her as unintended consequences rather than deliberate choices. They asked her to reconsider, to find space for them again in her life. It was clear they expected their words to be enough, that a simple acknowledgement of their mistakes would erase decades of imbalance. But Amelia was no longer the daughter who had once craved their approval. She read the letter not with longing or hope, but with detachment. Their words carried no weight. She had already built a life in which their validation was irrelevant.
Sophia, too, had transformed. No longer tethered to their expectations, she had chosen a path entirely her own.
She had moved abroad, dedicating herself to working with underserved communities in global health initiatives. For the first time in their lives, she was not living according to what their parents wanted, but by her own values. The absence of their control had allowed her to become someone she could be proud of. Unlike Amelia, Sophia had chosen to respond to their letter, not with reconciliation, but with clarity. She expressed that she would not be part of a relationship built on conditions and guilt. It was a final severing of ties, not out of anger, but acceptance that they could never be the parents they had once wished them to be. Amelia, however, had no words left for them. She left the letter unanswered. It no longer mattered. Instead, she turned her focus to something far greater. She had made it through the fire alone, but she knew others wouldn't always be so fortunate. She took young female researchers under her wing, mentoring them with the guidance she had once longed for. She became the advocate, the mentor, the supporter she had never received from her own parents. Their letter was their last attempt to hold on to her, but they had already lost her long before. Not because she had abandoned them, but because she had finally chosen herself. 5 years had passed, and Amelia stood at the entrance of the building that bore her name. The Dr. Amelia Carter Neurosurgical Institute was no longer just a dream. It was real, a testament to everything she had built on her own. The institute stood tall in the heart of California's leading medical district, a hub for groundbreaking neurosurgical research and innovation. This was no ordinary institution. It was a beacon for young doctors and researchers, particularly women, who had faced the same struggles she once had. It was a place for those who were overlooked, underestimated, and told they would never be enough. Here, merit alone dictated success, not favoritism, not influence, and certainly not the validation of those who had never truly seen them. As she walked through the gleaming halls, past laboratories filled with dedicated researchers, past conference rooms, where the next generation of surgeons would shape the future, she felt something she had never quite allowed herself to fully embrace before: peace. She had fought for every inch of this journey, had proven to herself time and time again that she was more than the shadow her family had cast over her. But now there was no more battle to fight. She had won in the only way that mattered. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a notification of a new email. Her parents. It was the first time she had heard from them in years. No doubt it was another attempt at reconciliation, another regret-filled message about their past mistakes, another plea for a connection they had destroyed long ago. Unlike the first letter they had sent, she didn't even bother to read this one. Her fingers hovered over the screen for only a second before pressing delete. No hesitation, no second guessing. There was no longer any wound to reopen, no lingering pain to address. Whatever words they had written, whatever excuses or apologies they had offered, it no longer mattered. Amelia had built her own life on her own terms, and she had done it without them. Stepping outside, she looked up at the massive sign above the entrance: Dr. Amelia Carter Neurosurgical Institute. Founded on merit, not favoritism, it was more than just words. It was her entire story. Every sacrifice, every moment of rejection, every time she had been cast aside, had led her here. She had spent years seeking validation from people who would never truly see her. But now she realized the only approval she had ever needed was her own. As the evening sun cast a golden glow over the city, Amelia smiled. Not for the past, not for what she had lost, but for everything she had gained. She turned and walked through the Institute's doors, stepping fully into the future she had built for herself. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that success isn't about where we come from. It's about what we choose to build for ourselves. In today's world, many people experience favoritism, being underestimated, or feeling overshadowed by others who are given advantages they never had. Whether it's within families, workplaces, or society, it's easy to feel discouraged when others are handed opportunities that we have to fight for. But Amelia's journey teaches us an important lesson. Self-worth isn't determined by outside validation. She didn't let her family's rejection define her. Instead, she worked harder, built her own legacy, and ultimately proved that merit will always outshine favoritism in the end. The key takeaway: invest in yourself. Don't wait for approval from those who refuse to see your worth. Create your own opportunities, develop your skills, and surround yourself with people who genuinely support your growth. If someone tries to hold you back, let your success be the response, not resentment, not revenge, but undeniable achievement. At the end of the day, the greatest power you have is believing in yourself, even when no one else does. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to share more stories with you. See you in the next one.